Clara remained silent, nodding slightly. Though she said nothing, the terror in her wide, fearful eyes revealed everything. Slowly, she and Uncle Marcus moved toward the staircase, each step growing heavier as they ascended. The air thickened, turning suffocatingly cold, making it hard to breathe. When the door to the 6th floor came into view, it creaked open with an eerie, bone-chilling creak, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. A freezing gust of wind blew out from inside, hitting their faces and sending shivers down their spines, as if forewarning something horrific. The flashlight beam stretched ahead, revealing a horrifying sight. Tyler, Clara's colleague, stood motionless in the dimly lit hallway. His body was twisted grotesquely, as though an unseen force was cruelly breaking every joint. His eyes were wide open, blank and white, his mouth frozen in a silent scream of despair. His neck was unnaturally bent backward, defying all logic. Before them, Tyler's body collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been severed, lifeless and limp. "Tyler!" Clara screamed, rushing toward him. But in the blink of an eye, it was too late. A shadowy figure, faint but menacing, with glowing red eyes, flickered behind Tyler before vanishing into thin air. His lifeless body crumpled to the cold, hard floor. Clara dropped to her knees, trembling, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. "We have to leave now," Uncle Marcus exclaimed, grabbing her shoulders and pulling her up. Though his own fear was palpable, his survival instincts took over. But the nightmare was far from over. As they raced down the staircase, desperate to escape, they inexplicably found themselves in front of a familiar door, the entrance to the building's storage room. The heavy wooden door swung open on its own, as if it had been awaiting their arrival for an eternity. Cold, suffocating air poured out from the doorway. They froze, exchanging terrified glances, but deep down, they knew there was no other way out. With no choice left, they stepped inside, their hearts pounding in their chests. The storage room was dark, its musty, decayed smell making them nauseous. But stranger still was the sight of another door, small and narrow, leading down to a hidden basement. Uncle Marcus, startled, muttered, "A basement? I never knew this building had one." Suspicion filled his voice. His flashlight illuminated the narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air below was icy, every breath feeling like it was being swallowed by a void. Clara froze. "We shouldn't go down there," she stammered. But their feet, as if compelled by an unseen force, moved forward without their consent. As they reached the basement, the dim beam of the flashlight flickered and settled on an even more horrifying scene. Harrison, another of Clara's colleagues, stood in the corner of the room. In his hands, he gripped a long metal rod, which he plunged into his own body without hesitation. Blood gushed from his wounds, pooling in thick, dark streams on the floor. But Harrison didn't stop. His face, contorted in agony, showed no sign of stopping as he drove the rod into his throat, repeatedly, in horrifying silence. Uncle Marcus and Clara stood paralyzed, unable to move. They wanted to rush forward and stop him, but they were frozen in place, overwhelmed by the sheer madness unfolding before them. The flashlight slipped from Uncle Marcus's hand, rolling across the floor and casting its faint light on the grotesque tableau of blood and despair. It felt as though every escape route had been sealed, leaving only terror to envelop them in the encroaching darkness. Part 6. The Story of Hailey. The Cursed Basement. The air in the basement felt suffocatingly heavy, pressing down on Clara with an almost physical weight. Uncle Marcus's flashlight flickered, then fell to the ground, its weak beam rolling across the floor and heightening the tension, as though foreshadowing the unspeakable horror about to unfold. The scene before Clara left her dizzy, her heart pounding, cold sweat dripping down the back of her neck. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, blocked by the rising tide of terror. Harrison, the once familiar colleague, was now the embodiment of incomprehensible madness. With deliberate, unflinching determination, he plunged the metal rod into his own body over and over again. Blood erupted from each wound, a dark, viscous flood staining the floor. The dim light of the flashlight illuminated the scene just enough to show the crimson pool darkening, consuming all hope like a bottomless abyss. The air filled with the sickening stench of blood and despair, suffocating Clara and Uncle Marcus as they stood powerless in the face of the unrelenting nightmare. Her legs trembled, and a horrifying dread strangled every breath she took. Her mind spun, her vision blurred under the weight of fear that had long surpassed her limits. Despite her dizziness, her eyes were glued to the harrowing sight before her. Harrison was destroying himself with his own hands. Every stab into his eyes echoed endlessly in her mind, rendering everything around her a blurry, haunting haze. Yet the most terrifying detail was something she failed to notice in that moment. Harrison's eyes, lifeless though they were, remained wide open, filled with fury and agony. His final gaze wasn't one of pain from the act of suicide, but of profound fear. But Harrison wasn't looking ahead, nor into the void. He was staring fixedly at something beside Clara. Harrison's eyes seemed to convey something, a silent warning about some unspeakable terror present right next to her. But the horror gnawing at her mind prevented her from comprehending it. Her body froze, as if paralyzed by panic. She stared at Harrison's blood-smeared, distorted face, her mind utterly numb, unable to register the lurking threat beside her. Clara wanted to scream, but the paralyzing fear swallowed her voice. In desperation, she turned and clutched Uncle Marcus's hand, her pale lips trembling as she forced out disjointed words. "Uncle Marcus, we need to leave. Call the police." Each word felt like it was strangled in the cold, suffocating air. But as her eyes swept over Uncle Marcus, an icy chill ran down her spine, and her fear transformed into deep, consuming terror. Something was profoundly wrong. Before the gruesome sight of Harrison, Uncle Marcus displayed no shock, no fear. Instead, he stood there with a chilling calmness, his cold, unflinching gaze betraying a calculated composure, as if Harrison's death had been anticipated all along. A dreadful truth began to crystallize in Clara's mind. It felt as though the ground beneath her was collapsing. She realized that Uncle Marcus might not be as simple as he appeared. Uncle Marcus didn't look at Clara. Instead, he stepped closer to Harrison's corpse, silently picking up an old, tattered notebook, the journal Harrison had discovered in the storage room and had desperately tried to destroy before his death. Uncle Marcus's gaze lingered on the yellowed pages, a faint smile curling his lips. Clara felt her throat tighten, fear surging as she asked, her voice quivering. What are you doing? Why are you?" Uncle Marcus lifted his head, his dark, ominous eyes startling her into stepping back. "Perhaps it's time. Everything has become clear now," he said, his voice calm, but laced with an unsettling undertone. The story began to unfold in Uncle Marcus's cold recounting. It turned out he was the biological father of Hailey, the young woman who had gone missing months ago. But the most horrifying revelation was his true identity. A priest of a secret cult worshipping a dark god. His grim faith had led him to abandon his family. After Hailey's mother died during childbirth, he left Hailey at an orphanage to pursue the shadows of this sinister religion. The company where they worked wasn't just a random workplace for Uncle Marcus. The entire building was owned by him. Ironically, during his time working there as a security guard to pass the time, he discovered Hailey, the daughter he had abandoned, was employed at the company. However, just a few months ago, Hailey mysteriously disappeared after being accused of embezzling company funds. Everyone believed she had fled in fear of prosecution, but Uncle Marcus didn't buy into the rumors. He investigated on his own, piecing together the horrifying truth from Hailey's journal. Hailey hadn't been the embezzler. It was her close friends who framed her. These included Lauren, the head of HR, Tyler, the IT specialist, Clara, the records clerk, and Harrison, Hailey's ex-boyfriend. They had falsely accused Hailey and likely murdered her to cover up their crime. From the moment he uncovered this cruel reality, Uncle Marcus quietly plotted his revenge. He understood that even if he brought those responsible to justice, their punishment would only be imprisonment, and Hailey could never return. So he chose a darker path, performing a ritual to summon a demon, calling upon malevolent forces to avenge his daughter's wrongful death. And now, those who had betrayed Hailey faced horrifying consequences. Tyler and Lauren had died under mysterious circumstances, and Harrison had taken his own life in inexplicable madness. Clara, the last survivor, stood trembling before him, consumed by terror.